Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Ayush and Janit podcast. I'm your host, Ayush Nair, and today I've got my great co-host, Janit the Silva. Round of
Hey
applause.
everyone.
So, in our last episode, we briefly touched upon education, and in today's episode, we're gonna do the same, but we're just gonna expand on it. We're gonna talk about education and basically compare and contrast our the education systems where we've studied. Janet has mainly studied in Sri Lanka. To give a bit of context to our viewers, Janet has mainly studied in Sri Lanka, and during his university, he obviously studied in Malaysia. I, on the other hand, have studied all over the place and Malaysia. So we're just gonna compare and contrast. So Janet, let me just start with you. You were in Sri Lanka for your primary, secondary schooling, and
Yeah,
then when it came to tertiary, you selected Malaysia. When you came here and well, you're done with your degree now, what differences did you see between the Sri Lankan education system and the Malaysian education system?
I think the Sri Lankan education system is a lot more go behind your back, make sure you get all the work done, not just in school, but I mean outside of school as well, like in universities, as at least for the private ones. They really do make sure you understand what you're doing, and it's not just for the sake of teaching. While in Malaysia, the teaching is good. Don't get me wrong; it's great. I feel it's you do your work, or let's get left behind. Um, the amount of support I would say when you actually need to do something, especially in university, is almost none. The teachers will help you absolutely. Like they, will, if you don't understand something in class, yeah, but I mean, outside it, it's not as much, I would say. Like, there have been multiple times in subjects. Even the students aren't very helpful either. So, unless you really know, like, a few friends you trust, you're pretty much screwed. But I think it's not just Sri Lanka, even India and, like, Pakistan, Bangladesh. They're very, very, like, pushy towards education. So, if you don't understand, they will go through it like 1,000 times with you until you get it, which is quite good. But in Malaysia, they don't. But it is also kind of good because you learn to learn and like understand problems on your own, I would say, and try to fix them on your own. While back home, you're given so much support, I suppose you aren't really critically thinking as much. So
Hmm.
here it's you got to figure the problem out, which is not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think that's the key differentiation between Indian, Sri Lanka, well, South Asian education, should I say, and Southeast Asian education. In South Asia, at least, if I talk from an Indian perspective, we have this. Well, when I was in India for my primary schooling, I remember that we had to do a lot of memorization. Memorize maybe if you're talking about, I don't know, biology or chemistry, we had to memorize certain diagrams to draw it well, or be it for maths or for English or for social sciences. We have this term in Hindi called ratta lagana, which basically means memorizing it. I think that's where the whole thing comes from, the pushy feeling that you were talking about. It, I think, stems from the fact that we've always been told that you've always got to memorize your stuff in education. At least you've got to memorize it. But while I was in Malaysia, I think what I saw was, despite the teachers putting 100% of the effort, the students didn't reciprocate that. They didn't reciprocate the same understanding or the same or the same belief that we're going towards a common goal of understanding a certain topic. And I think that's what mainly has been with Malaysian education. Now obviously we're talking from a 3 year experience, or 4 year experience for me being in Malaysian education. But what I saw in students is that very lackadaisical attitude towards that education. I've seen that, and I've just seen some of them sleeping during class. I've seen some of them just not having bare interest in the class. And I think it just has. you just kind of think as either as an international student or as someone from a different who comes from a different educational board. You just think to yourself, is this for real that that they're being really lackadaisical? And somehow they end up getting amazing grades. I don't know what they do. They still end up getting distinctions and high distinctions. So I and
But to be fair, like some of the class, okay, don't get me wrong, you shouldn't be sleeping in your classes for
yeah,
sure.
you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
But there have been a few lectures where I have gone into and they literally read off the slides exact word to word. And at that
Yeah,
point, you're just thinking, and I think you and I have been in a few as well.
yeah,
Why
yeah. We've
would
been
you
there.
spend your time? I can just stay at home and watch the slides on my own. I don't need to come here. I mean,
Exactly.
yes, it's up to the student, but sometimes you need to make it a bit interactive. Otherwise, people are just gonna doze off. They don't care. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest sort of thing. And back home, it was like, whether the class was good or not, you had to attend. You had
Hmm.
to pay attention. If not, there was repercussions afterwards. Here, it's not so much. Here, you could doze off and you could get away with it. No one cares.
True.
But it's not just here. I know in the US and the UK, they're also like this. It's up to you to learn. We'll give you what you need, but it's not really, we don't really care how you do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
And
that's kind of how it is here.
and I think that's what I've seen, especially with a lot of the times when we were in groups. And I'm not talking about me and you. I'm talking about some of my different experiences. I've had potentially three or four groups that I've had such bad experiences with that I just don't want to repeat it again in my life. I know
Hmm.
I'm done with my uni, but if I go to any other uni for for my master's, I'm sure I'm gonna repent the fact that I didn't have either good group mates to be around with. And when you're in a group, you don't want to establish yourself as a leader. You even though you're given the name of a leader, but you're just working five people or six or how many it is. You're just working towards a common goal that is getting a good grade at the end. I don't necessarily want to push people. I don't necessarily want to push people towards getting that. Like at the end of the day, I was grateful. I was grateful that some of my group mates were really, even the fact that I was angry or whatever I was, they were very, they were okay with me and they stuck by me. So I was very grateful for that. But some of them, I remember this one very vividly. It was an 8 a.m. class. I think it was services marketing in uni.
I
And
know what you're talking about.
yeah, so Janet obviously knows it, but for my viewers, I'll just brief you on what that was. So we had to make a non-governmental organization that was not obviously a true NGO, but a fake one. We created one, and I've had numerous people just come and go, come and go, come and go, because they used to give the most dumbest, and I'm really sorry for this language. They used to give the most dumbest excuse ever. And one of the previous gave the excuse of that I was very pushy towards them. I was, and I thought to myself, where? When did I ever do that? I mean, I was never pushy towards that. I'm not gonna name that person, towards that person at all. That I was making them, wanting to do the work because obviously it's a group effort. You want to get the greatest grade possible to actually succeed in that class. So obviously my teacher got to know. And I just ended up having a meeting with her, and she was like, okay. And I told her from my point of view, well, we hadn't even started anything. We were only maybe one or two meetings in, and she just called it quits. And we're just like to the teacher, we haven't even started. We haven't even discussed anything. We haven't even done anything, and she just called it quits. So I'm actually thankful that the teacher really understood. So shout out to Rachel for that. Thank you for being so understanding towards my plight. Um, So yeah, I've had numerous worst experience when it comes to group. It's supposed to be your worst. I've never heard one from you.
Me, let's see. I've had my issues. I don't like to take control of the team. I like to instead watch from the sidelines. Um, I've had my fair share of groupmates I can't work with, and then some of them can barely do anything. But you don't want to rat them out either because it makes you look like a bad teammate. So even though I've
Hmm.
tried multiple times, I've just realized sometimes you just can't work with people. And then at that point, you need to establish yourself saying, listen, you can be part of this or not. And you have to like put down some force. Um, because in the end of the day, you have to just look after yourself. It doesn't matter what they do. You just need to look out for yourself, honestly. And if they
Yeah.
really don't want to help you, I guess you have to sort of tell someone, or try to handle it in your own way. But yeah, I've had a few experiences which I really didn't like.
Yeah, and I think it's just that whole, you can't change people, right? You can't make people yourself and be like, you have to do this or you got to do this. People have their own
Yeah.
things in their life. People, I don't know, want to go out to the club or want to go out with their friends or go on a trip with their family or whomever. And I'm not gonna blame them on that. That's on them. But obviously, as someone who comes from different, who has seen the world, who has seen different experiences, you really want to establish that order. That listen, can we at least get maybe a distinction? Can we at least get a high distinction? Can we at least get any of the two grades? Because you don't really want to just put a blank slate on education or on any group project and say like, okay, whatever is whatever, right? You don't want to do that. You don't. That's not a group leader or any team leader for that matter of fact. If we're talking about work, but yeah, people are lazy and you just got to deal with it. And you can't change them for you can't change them for a matter of fact. You can't make them you. So you just got to deal with how they are. You can have shitty teachers, I can say, and I think
You can have
we're pretty
shittier
good
teammates. Yeah. Yeah.
and shittier teammate, but you can have shittier teammates too. So, and I think education in Malaysia, I keep reading a lot of educational posts on Malaysia, and one of them that I read through was that in Southeast Asia, comparing Malaysian education to maybe Vietnam or Laos or Thailand or even Singapore for that matter of fact, it is so different compared to, and a lot of teachers say that we're actually lacking in good educational system compared to our neighbors, be it Thailand or Singapore or Vietnam. And that teacher said that it because of our focus on Bahasa Malaysia, on the Malaysian local language, and not much on the English education system, on in teaching English that they can either use abroad. So that
I
difference
think
you can
you're
see.
going into more a very local school sort of concept. I think we should stick to the whole private university aspect because I don't
Yeah.
want to get the two mixed up. I mean, as foreigners, you and I have been, I don't think we
Hmm.
know enough on the landscape to comment on like local schools and their teaching styles. But in terms of private education and university here, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but like it's different from what I expected for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's different because most of the teachers that we've had, they've had the greatest education. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
they have studied in the most top universities, be it in Malaysia or anywhere else in the world. They've had the greatest of education. But when they come over here, experiences vary, I would say. But I don't think it's anywhere related to wage, do you think? Do you think it's because of the salary that they get? I really have a doubt on that.
I'm
Do you
not
think?
sure, but I mean, I've had my share of teachers who had a big impact on me and the way I think now. I've had maybe one or two really, really good teachers, and I think they mentored some great people, and they're really out in Malaysia now. I mean, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but someone we had together,
Hmm.
he sort of mentored the person who created Tea Live. So, and
Oh
he
yeah,
had big,
I don't
yeah,
remember.
and then he, mentored us as well, and he was a very nice teacher. He really made me think in his class, really question everything,
Yeah,
and yeah, I'm really grateful I had someone like that. And yeah,
and
we had a few teachers who,
and I think a lot of the teachers that we've had, I remember one of my teachers. She was I can't remember from top of her head what her name was, but she was someone who did the exact same thing. She really, whenever we had a presentation, she used to question a lot. And that really got us thinking. I was like, okay, that's what really critical thinking really is. Because I think with Indian education system, the lack of critical thinking that you
yeah,
really need, it is lacking towards, be it if you're studying in a open university or a public one or a private one or any of the IITs or IIMs. I'm sure in IIMs they do teach critical thinking, but and the whole aspect of a university is the whole giving them a really good life, having all these events, have all these celebrities come to your campus, talk to the students and whatnot. And you just think to yourself, really? And you, as someone who has studied in Malaysia, you look at some of the videos, you're like, I'm thankful that I did not study in India. Because I
no,
would,
but the Indian education system, I would say, it's not the best. I mean, you look at like candidates that come out of universities like
oh yeah,
IIT, Madras, if they are like, I would say, just as equal to someone who studied at Harvard or MIT, or if not even greater, the level of,
yeah,
because in universities like those, the big ones, they have so many resources. They have a lot more than India, right? But the students who come out on top of like example IIT, they're on another level. Like you cannot comprehend, but they don't get the like obviously the opportunities people in the US would. You know,
hmm,
it really makes you think. Like I remember I was having a conversation with your dad about this when he came. Yeah, the
hmm,
quality of education, even from places like that, is just fantastic. And like you can really see the teaching that goes into it, and like how they make you think. They like really mold you into like someone who can really question something. But that's on the top tier. The younger schools, I suppose, students are more inclined to just listen to what teachers say,
yeah,
because it's kind of taboo, right, in Asia, for you to start asking questions when you're young or question the teacher. So where I come from, it's not that's not how you do it. Instead, in university, they encourage you to question the teacher. Hell, I've had my issues with many professors where I've questioned them outright. But I was grateful they didn't really, like say anything to me. Instead, they encouraged it and explained and all that,
yeah.
which is good.
And I think that's what I've seen with the business owners in the current day and age. A lot of the young entrepreneurs in India, they haven't done a lot of studying. Like, Indian parents might say, "No, son, you should do your
Hmm.
masters in Australia or New Zealand or Malaysia, for that matter of fact. I'll promote Malaysia happily if I have to, or America or Canada or wherever in the world."
Yeah.
But I remember I was reading this. I was listening to this podcast. There's this Indian company called Zepto. So it's a quick commerce kind of application, and one of their owners by the name of Adit Palicha, he has barely done any education. He hasn't done masters, by the way. He's Even though he studied in Stanford, he's done his I'm actually looking at his LinkedIn page. But currently, he's done his bachelor's degree in computer science, but actually dropped out of Stanford. So for any Indian parent, that must have been such a you're thinking to yourself, why would you have dropped out of Stanford? Like it's such a big school that anyone in the world would love to go. And there and the company is now valued at I think close to $1 billion. So I
Wow.
think,
Okay.
yeah, and I think that's the thing with the Indian education system is that it might not, it might be the greatest in the world as people might proclaim to be, but it's an education system that has built entrepreneurs. It has built Zeptos. It has built your Zomatos of the world, the quick commerce, as I said, or your Tatas of the world. RIP to Ratan Tata, by the way. Your Ambanis of the world, or your Adanis of the world, or any Indian entrepreneur for that matter of fact. Anyone's not done a lot of education over here, but they've built something over here. And would I say it's a credit to Indian education system? Maybe, maybe not. It's a very 50-50 thing. But yeah, I think
See,
the
the way
future
you're
of
describing it, it's like education is the university you go to. I believe that's a qualification. I think education, what you have is like the skills you gather along the way and like the process you go through. That's an education for me, not just a qualification personally. That's probably,
yeah.
example, like you said, someone who got into Stanford and just quit. That just means he was smart enough to get into Stanford and he felt he didn't need it. That's all you need. If he could genuinely believe he could do much better than spending 2 or 3 years giving his life to a
Hmm.
university. I mean, good on him. That just means he's established himself well enough and he's educated personally to do that.
Yeah. And I think the future of South of should I just if I put it in a whole basket, the Asian education, I think that's a very growing trend. If you compare it to America's or the European education system, it is one of the greatest, and I will say that happily that the Asian
Hmm.
education system is great.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think a lot of nations really need to deep dive into their education system and really look into what can be done to improve. Be it if it's the Malaysian education system or the Sri Lankan or the Indian education system. Every education system has a flaw. You can't have a perfect education system. You cannot. That's simply not achievable. But you can have a flaw and try to improve on it and see what can be done. Maybe build the next Tatas or your Ambanis or your Zeptos or Zomatos for that matter of fact. Build on that. Build entrepreneurs. Build people. Build skills. You don't need to build people based on what they've studied on. Who knows? Maybe in the next 10 years we'll have a next Ambani. So we'll create a massive conglomerate of services, not just in India but globally as well. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to our second episode on the education systems, Malaysia and India and Sri Lanka. And we hope to see you soon. And this podcast will be out very soon on YouTube. So goodbye, people.